There are moments in life when silence says everything. That morning, the silence was deafening, the kind that presses against your chest until you can feel your own heartbeat echoing inside it. My phone lay on the table, screen glowing softly with a single photo that had changed everything. A golden wedding invitation. My cousin Emma's smile stretched wide across the frame, her fingers proudly holding it up for the camera. The caption underneath read, "Can't believe it's finally happening. On family forever." I stared at it for a long time, waiting for something. Maybe a second post, maybe a message, something addressed to me. But nothing came. Just that single image, mocking me through the screen. At first, I tried to laugh it off. Maybe my invitation hadn't arrived yet. Maybe it got lost in the mail. Families forget things sometimes, right? Except mine didn't. Not when it came to events like this. Especially not when it came to Emma. She was the golden one, the perfect daughter, the one everyone adored, the one my mother compared me to in every conversation. Emma got the good grades, the perfect fiancé, the dream wedding. And now apparently she also had the power to decide who counted as family. I opened our family group chat out of habit. It was buzzing with messages, emojis, pictures of dresses, relatives talking about travel plans. I scrolled up and saw everyone's name. Everyone's except mine. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. I refreshed the chat, closed it, reopened it. But no, the title said, "Family Wedding, Updates Only." I wasn't in it. That's when the realization hit. Not like a slap, but like a quiet pull in the chest. That soft, sinking feeling that tells you the people you trust have already made their choice. And it doesn't include you. I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry right away. I just sat there, phone in hand, coffee growing cold, trying to make sense of how something so simple, a missing invitation, could hurt so much. After a while, I called my mother. She answered cheerfully, like everything was perfectly normal. "Hey, honey, how's your weekend going?" "It was fine," I said carefully. "I just saw the post about Emma's wedding." "Oh, yes. Isn't it exciting?" she replied. "It's going to be beautiful. Emma's been planning it for months." There was a pause. A silence heavy enough to crush the space between us. I forced a laugh. "So, when's my invitation coming?" Another pause. Then a sigh. "Sweetheart, please don't take it personally. Emma wanted something. Smaller this time. Just immediate family." I blinked. "Immediate family?" "Yes," she said softly, her tone shifting. "You know how things have been lately. With you being busy, missing a few get-togethers. Emma thought maybe what, Mom?" I cut in, my voice trembling despite my effort to sound calm. "That I don't belong anymore?" She didn't answer. That silence, that same crushing, suffocating silence, told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision. They had chosen to leave me out. After the call, I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still in my hand, staring at nothing. The world outside was alive, birds chirping, cars passing, sunlight spilling through the curtains. But inside, it felt frozen. That kind of pain doesn't scream, it just settles. Slowly, quietly, until every memory feels heavier than it used to. I thought of all the birthdays I'd shown up for, the gifts I'd bought, the nights I'd stayed up comforting Emma after her breakups. I thought of every family dinner where I'd been the one helping in the kitchen while others laughed in the living room. And now I wasn't even worth an invitation. By evening, the numbness began to fade, replaced by something sharper. Not anger, not yet. But clarity. The kind that comes when you finally stop making excuses for people who keep hurting you. I opened social media again, scrolling through post after post, cousins tagging each other, sharing excitement about the big family reunion. And then I saw Emma's reply under one of the comments. "Can't wait to see almost everyone together again." Almost everyone. 2 words. That was all it took to confirm what I already knew. This wasn't about space or budget or forgetting. It was deliberate. For the first time, my chest burned. Not with heartbreak, but with something stronger. I had spent my whole life trying to fit into a family that never made room for me. I was the peacemaker, the quiet one, the one who swallowed every insult because it was just how family is. But this time they had gone too far. They didn't just forget me, they erased me. I looked at that photo of the golden invitation again, and for the first time I didn't feel small. I felt awake. If they thought they could leave me out and pretend I didn't matter, they were wrong. My revenge wouldn't be loud or cruel. It wouldn't be about ruining their day. It would be about reminding them who they had underestimated, about showing them that sometimes the ones you exclude become the ones you can't ignore anymore. That night, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed softly in the dark as I started typing. Not messages of anger, not accusations, but something entirely different. Something that would quietly shift the ground beneath their perfect little world. Because when family shuts you out, you learn to build your own door, one that opens to something far greater than their approval. And I wasn't planning on knocking ever again. People always said I came from a good family. You know the type, the ones that smile for photos, send matching holiday cards, and make everything look picture perfect from the outside. But behind those smiles, behind those carefully chosen words at every dinner table, there was tension thick enough to choke on. I grew up surrounded by people who cared more about how things looked than how they actually felt. My mother was the image keeper, the one who made sure our family appeared flawless, no matter how cracked it really was. Family is everything, she used to say. But what she really meant was, family reputation is everything. Emma, my cousin, was her pride. Even more than me, her own daughter. Emma was the model of success. She went to the right schools, dated the right kind of men, wore designer clothes even when she was just meeting us for lunch. And every time she entered a room, my mother's eyes would light up, as if she were looking at the daughter she wished she had. Me, I was different. Not rebellious, not a troublemaker, just different. I liked quiet places, honest conversations, art and books that made people uncomfortable because they told the truth. I didn't care about appearances. I didn't chase approval, and that in my family was the real sin. Ever since we were kids, Emma and I were compared, constantly, cruelly, and without pause. If I got an A, Emma got an A+. If I got a new dress, hers was newer, shinier, more expensive. It became a pattern. I'd try, she'd outshine. And the worst part? I stopped trying. When I was younger, I thought Emma and I were close. We shared secrets, watched movies together, and laughed about the weird adults in our family. But somewhere along the way, she learned that being the favorite came with benefits, and I learned what it felt like to always come second. Family dinners were the hardest. They always started the same way: laughter, compliments, a toast to togetherness. But underneath it, there were invisible lines. Every word was measured, every glance calculated. Who brought the best dish? Who wore what? Who had the most impressive news? I remember one dinner vividly, the one that started the slow unraveling of everything. It was last year, the night Emma brought her fiancé Ryan to meet everyone. Ryan was charming in that practiced way, confident handshake, polished smile, stories that sounded a little too rehearsed. He was the kind of man who looked at you not as a person, but as a mirror to reflect himself. Everyone adored him instantly. My mother, my aunts, even my uncle who barely liked anyone. And then there was me, sitting at the corner of the table quietly observing. At one point during dessert, Emma asked me, "So, what do you think of Ryan?" I smiled and said lightly, "He looks like he could be on one of those reality shows. You know, the ones where they make everyone compete for attention?" Everyone laughed, the kind of nervous laughter that fills awkward spaces. Even Emma chuckled, though her eyes didn't. Ryan smiled too, but I caught the flash of irritation behind it. Quick, sharp, like a spark behind glass. Later that night, I overheard them talking in the hallway. Ryan's voice was low but angry. "Your cousin doesn't respect me," he said. "She made me look like a joke in front of everyone." Emma's reply was muffled, but it was enough to know she didn't defend me. After that night, things changed. Messages became shorter, invitations fewer, My mother started speaking about Emma's wedding like it was something that didn't concern me. "They're keeping it simple," she'd say. "You know how modern couples are." But I knew the truth. It wasn't modern, it was malicious. And the saddest part? My mother didn't just accept it, she went along with it. I think in her mind, I had always been a disappointment she tried to love anyway. She wanted me to be more like Emma, polished, predictable, easy to brag about. I could feel it in the way she spoke about me in front of others. "She's doing fine," she'd say, with that careful tone people use when fine means not good enough. So when the invitation never came, I wasn't shocked because of Emma. I was shocked because no one, not even my own mother, thought it was wrong. They had built a perfect little world, and I was the flaw in the photo. But the thing about people who hide behind perfection is that they crumble the fastest when the truth surfaces. And oh, there were plenty of truths buried beneath that golden wedding glow. There was Aunt Claire, who smiled at everyone's success but couldn't stand her own daughters. There was Uncle George, who pretended to be the peacemaker but fueled half the family fights with his gossip. There were cousins who envied each other's marriages, aunts who despised each other's kids, a whole web of quiet resentment, all hidden under polite laughter and champagne toasts. Our family wasn't perfect. It was a performance, and Emma had just gotten the lead role. But the funny thing about performances, they depend on the audience staying quiet. And I was done being silent. That realization didn't come like lightning. It came slowly, over days of scrolling through wedding updates that I wasn't part of. Every post, every tagged photo, every "can't wait to see everyone" made something inside me harden. Not bitterness, but resolve. I didn't want revenge for the sake of pain. I wanted truth. I wanted to hold up a mirror to the people who spent their lives pretending to be flawless and show them what they'd really become. Because the perfect family wasn't perfect at all. It was just a collection of fragile egos, stitched together by fear of embarrassment. And I had finally stopped being afraid, so I began to plan. Not a loud, dramatic plan, but a quiet, meticulous one. A way to make them see me without saying a single word. To remind them that you can't erase someone who refuses to disappear. What they didn't know yet was that their biggest mistake wasn't leaving me out of that wedding. Their biggest mistake was giving me a reason to stop trying to belong. The week after I learned about the wedding felt like walking through fog. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. I went to work, smiled at people, answered emails, laughed when I was supposed to. But beneath it all, there was that dull ache in my chest. The kind that doesn't scream or stab, it just lingers, quietly draining the warmth out of everything. I kept telling myself it wasn't a big deal. It was just a wedding. But every time my phone buzzed, I felt that small jolt of hope. Maybe someone would reach out. Maybe someone would ask, "Hey, are you coming?" No one did. Not my mother. Not my cousins. Not even the aunts who used to call me just to gossip about everyone else. It was as if I had disappeared from their world. A few days later, I stopped by the grocery store near my apartment. I ran into Aunt Claire, one of those relatives who always knew everything before anyone else. She spotted me first, all smiles and fake warmth. "Oh my goodness. Look at you. How's life treating you, sweetheart?" I forced a polite smile. "Doing okay. How about you?" "Oh, busy as ever," she said, adjusting her sunglasses even though we were indoors. "So much to do before the wedding?" Her words hit like a slap, though her tone was casual, deliberate, almost rehearsed. "The wedding?" I asked, feigning confusion. She blinked, then her smile faltered for half a second, just enough to give her away. "Oh, right, you must have already heard. Emma's big day. Next Saturday." "Yeah," I said quietly, watching her squirm. "I heard." Her eyes darted around. "Well, I'm sure your mom explained everything." You know how these things are. Limited space, small guest list. "Right," I said, my voice calm but sharp enough to slice through her excuses. "Limited to everyone except me, apparently." She gave a nervous laugh. "Oh, don't say that. It's nothing personal." But it was personal. Everyone knew it. Everyone just pretended not to. She left quickly after that, muttering something about running late. I watched her walk away, clutching her designer purse like she couldn't wait to get back to her comfort zone, the family circle I no longer belonged to. That evening, I called my younger cousin Lily. She had always been the kind one, the only person in the family who seemed genuinely warm. "Hey," she said when she picked up, her tone hesitant. "I was actually about to call you," I sighed. "You don't have to walk on eggshells, Lil. I already know I'm not invited." There was silence on the line. Then she whispered, "I didn't agree with it. None of it. But Emma said—" She said what? That she didn't want any negativity at her wedding. "She said you always make things awkward." I let out a bitter laugh. "Make things awkward? Because I exist? She thinks you don't support her relationship," Lily continued, voice small. "After that dinner with Ryan, she said you looked down on him." I closed my eyes. So a harmless joke turned into character assassination. Typical. Lily exhaled shakily. "I wanted to tell you earlier, but Mom said to stay out of it. They all agreed to just not bring it up." "They all agreed," I repeated slowly. "So they had a meeting about me. Without me." That sentence hung heavy in the air. For the first time, the betrayal stopped being vague. It became solid, real, undeniable. It wasn't just that I hadn't been invited. It was that everyone knew, and no one cared enough to stand up for me. The silent betrayal had been going on long before the invitation ever went missing. This was just the final act. After that call, I started noticing things differently. The fake concern, the polite check-ins, the pitying emojis on my social posts. It was all there, I just hadn't seen it for what it was. People pretending to care while quietly closing the door behind me. Even my mother had changed her tone. Whenever I called, she spoke as if nothing was wrong, as if pretending would erase the truth. "I hope you're keeping busy," she'd say. "I am," I'd reply. Then she'd add, "Don't hold grudges, sweetheart. Family doesn't mean to hurt each other." But it wasn't what she said that hurt. It was how she said it, like the responsibility to forgive was mine, even when the wound wasn't. Every word, every silence was another reminder of how easy it was for them to exclude me. How natural it came to act like I didn't exist. One night, while scrolling through my feed, I stumbled upon a post from Emma again, a short video this time. She was showing off her bridal dress, twirling under soft lights, surrounded by people I once called family. The caption read, "Surrounded by love. Can't wait for next week." In the background, I caught sight of my mother, laughing, clapping, holding a glass of champagne. It wasn't just exclusion anymore. It was betrayal. She had known from the beginning. She had chosen them over me. That realization hit harder than anything else. For a long time, I had convinced myself that maybe she was just trying to keep the peace. But no, she had taken her side. And that's when anger finally came. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that builds. Quiet, steady, dangerous. I didn't cry that night. I didn't send messages or write emotional posts. I just sat there, staring at that glowing screen, letting every emotion settle into place like pieces of a puzzle. Because now, I finally understood something. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes wrapped in smiles and silence. Sometimes it hides in group photos and polite excuses. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was whispered. And I had heard every single word. So I made a decision. I wouldn't chase them. I wouldn't beg for explanations or forgiveness or validation. Instead, I would listen, watch, wait. Because in families like mine, truth always finds a way out. And when it doesn't just whisper back. It roars, and when that moment came, I was going to be ready. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. Nothing cinematic like a slammed door or shouting match. Real betrayals rarely come with grand finales. They arrive in small, precise moments that add up until the truth sits in your lap and you can't ignore it anymore. The truth came to me in fragments, like shards of glass stitched together to form an image I didn't want to see. It started with a text message from Lily. Short, hesitant, just 3 lines. "We need to talk." Not here. She asked to meet at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from my apartment. I thought maybe she wanted to comfort me. Instead, she held a folder on her lap and looked like someone carrying news that would hurt her as much as it hurt me. "Tell me," I said before she could find the words to soften it. "Why didn't they invite me?" "Just tell me straight." Lily's hands trembled. "It's complicated. It started with that dinner. Ryan told Emma things." She swallowed. "But it wasn't just about that joke. There's more. Things people have been saying about you for months." My stomach tightened. "What things?" She pulled the folder toward me. Inside were screenshots, old messages, forwarded texts, private posts that had been copied and passed around. At first glance, they looked harmless, the kind of petty gossip that families pass around like a seasonal dish. But layered between them were insinuations. Notes about money, subtle mentions of unstable choices, rumors about my job that weren't true, and worst of all, a comment from Uncle George implying I was embarrassing to the family because of my lifestyle choices. They had been editing reality quietly, like artists retouching an old portrait until the face no longer resembled the person who had been painted. Lily's voice was low. "They started telling stories, little ones, nothing dramatic at first. She's always been difficult. She doesn't fit in. She has no ambition. Then someone suggested keeping the guest list small. And somehow you didn't make the cut." I felt like the floor had dropped out. For a moment, words failed me. Not because I had no reply, but because I realized how methodical it had been. Not a single person had stood up to stop it. Instead, they had all contributed one whisper at a time, until it turned into a chorus that drowned out anything I might say. "You kept quiet?" I asked Lily, not angry at her. She hadn't been part of creating this, but stunned at the scale of the silence that had allowed it. "I did," she admitted. "I should have said something, but when I tried, my mom told me to stay out of their business. Emma warned me it would cause drama. I was scared, honestly. They made me feel like telling the truth would be worse. So the betrayal was twofold. The active one of spreading rumors, and the passive one of everyone allowing those rumors to stand. They had built a narrative where I was the problem, and then used that narrative to justify leaving me out. It was a slow, clinical erasure. But there was another layer I hadn't anticipated: money and image. Lily hesitated, then said, "There's also talk about the wedding sponsors. Aunt Claire said the guest list is limited because of the venue, the brands involved. Emma wanted it to be curated, and they thought including you might complicate the image." Complicate the image? That was the clean, polite phrase that disguised the real reason. My existence would not fit their perfect photograph. They were terrified of a single person who didn't conform ruining a brand they were trying to sell at a family event. As the pieces fell into place, my anger morphed into something else, an understanding so cold it was almost clinical. This wasn't about one joke or one momentary slight. It was about power. They didn't simply exclude me because they disliked me. They excluded me because my presence threatened the story they wanted to tell about themselves. I remembered the way Aunt Claire had arranged her living room, pristine, curated, with objects placed like trophies. I thought about the tonality of their conversations, always measured, always polished to a sheen. I had never fit into that world because I had never been willing to mimic its gloss. Lily reached across and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry," she said. "I wish I had done more." The betrayal didn't feel lighter because I knew its mechanisms. If anything, knowing made it sharper. Knowing meant there was no accidental kindness left to hope for. Every slight had been deliberate. Every omission a decision. I thought about confronting them all, about walking into that living room, catching their eyes and naming every lie. But then I pictured their faces, set in the familiar expressions that had always defeated me. The serene, practiced sympathy, the faux bewilderment. I knew, with a clarity that surprised me, that confrontation would give them exactly what they wanted. The spectacle, the chaos, the confirmation of their narrative that I was dramatic, unstable, unpredictable. I refused to perform for them. Instead, the betrayal taught me to be strategic. If they wanted to write me out of the story, I would rewrite my own. If they wanted only curated appearances, I would build a life whose truth could not be edited away by a handful of whispers. I would let them keep their staged smiles. I would create a reality so undeniable they couldn't pretend it didn't exist. That night, as I walked home alone, the city lights felt different, harsher, clearer. The world hadn't changed. Only my eyes had. I felt stripped of illusions. The family portrait I had built in my head had been rearranged, the empty space where I belonged replaced with polite excuses and silent shoulders turned. It hurt, deeply, but it also freed me. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I was not waiting for someone to include me. I was planning what I would do next. Revenge in movies is a rush. Music swells, shots cut quickly. The protagonist stands under rain and delivers a line that rings in your head for days. Real life doesn't offer such neat catharsis. My version had to be quieter, smarter, something that didn't stoop to their level but outpaced it. I wanted poetic justice, not petty cruelty. I wanted my life to be the answer, not a spectacle of spite. So my plan had 3 simple rules. Stay dignified, be strategic, and make the truth visible without shouting it from the rooftops. First, I would reclaim my narrative. For years, their whispers had shaped how others perceived me. I could either keep reacting, or I could start telling my story on my terms. I began by cleaning up the little things. My resume, my social profiles, the image I projected. Sounds shallow, maybe, but it mattered. If people thought I was aimless or unreliable, I wanted to give them no excuse to believe that. I scheduled meetings with mentors I'd admired for years, reconnected with contacts I'd let fall away, and accepted a short-term consulting project that would put me in front of an audience of people who mattered in my field. It wasn't about bragging. It was about building undeniable proof of who I was. Second, I collected evidence. Not to accuse or to press charges. There was nothing criminal here, but to document the truth. If whispers could form a story, then facts could dismantle it. I saved messages, photographed invitations I'd never received, and kept a timeline of events. This wasn't about revenge as violence. It was about creating an archive that would show anyone who looked how deliberate their actions had been. Third, and most importantly, I found allies. Revenge is often imagined as a solitary mission, but that's a myth. The people who had excluded me had also relied on others to keep quiet. I needed voices who would speak truth where whispers had been allowed to grow. Lily was one. A handful of cousins, quietly embarrassed by what had happened, offered support. Even a former family friend, now a small-town blogger, agreed to cover the broader issue of family ostracism in a piece that would read more like a sympathetic exposé than a scandal. Everything I did had to be calibrated. I didn't want a public spectacle that would let them claim victimhood. I wanted a slow reveal, a series of moments where their polished image would crack under the weight of reality. I started by organizing a small event of my own, a community exhibition showcasing artists I admired, a place that combined my love of quiet spaces with my newfound determination. I invited people who mattered to me, not as a spiteful counter-invitation to Emma's wedding, but as a real gathering to celebrate what I valued. The night was simple. Local music, homemade food, conversations that stretched late into the night. It wasn't about numbers. It was about substance. Word spread. People who came to my exhibition posted photos and wrote warm notes about the atmosphere, the talent, and the authenticity of the evening. The posts were small, honest, and impossible to stage. In the weeks that followed, my work gained traction. An interview here, a glowing mention in a community newsletter there. Each small success felt like a quiet rejoinder to the narrative they had tried to sell. But the turning point was subtler than any public event. It was a private conversation with someone who had once been one of the family's most ardent cheerleaders, Aunt Claire. She called me one afternoon, voice cautious. "I saw the article," she said, "about your exhibit. It was lovely." There was an obvious hesitance in her tone, like someone who had finally realized they'd been standing on the edge of something fragile. I didn't gloat. I thanked her. I didn't need to. The invitation to continue the conversation never came. She didn't ask for my forgiveness or offer excuses. But the way she spoke suggested the narrative around me was shifting. Other things shifted too. Offers for collaborations, invitations to speak at local events, small professional wins that translated into opportunities. Each one chipped away at the lie that I wasn't capable, that I was somehow unworthy of inclusion. I made sure everything I did stayed above the petty line they had expected me to cross. When relatives posted smug photos, I didn't reply with venom. When someone asked with thinly veiled concern why I hadn't gone to the wedding, I responded with a calm explanation. I had other commitments. No drama, no begging for attention. Their silence became conspicuous. And then, the most satisfying moment came, not in a viral video or a tabloid headline, but in a small, private exchange that proved my strategy had worked. A distant cousin who had previously been complicit in the exclusion reached out. Her message was simple. I'm sorry for how things were handled. You were right all along. No fanfare, no public confession, just a quiet admission that the truth had been seen. Poetic justice doesn't have to be explosive. In my case, it was the slow accumulation of undeniable facts, my calm competence, my growing reputation, and a community that recognized value when it saw it. The family's curated image, once so impenetrable, began to show hairline cracks. People who had assumed I was the problem found themselves staring at proof that the problem had been their own willingness to believe comfortable lies. I won't pretend my plan didn't involve pain. It did. It required patience, restraint, and sometimes letting things go unresolved. But that was part of the point. I wanted to rise beyond their expectations, to make the outcome clear without stooping to cruelty. Justice, in my mind, looked like dignity restored and a life rebuilt, not a public shaming. The plan worked because it was rooted in truth. I didn't need to humiliate them to be heard. I only had to be visible in a way they couldn't control. As the wedding day came and went, photos flooded social media. People looked radiant, and some of them looked hollow. I watched from the sidelines, not with bitterness, but with a kind of quiet victory. They had their day. I had something far better. A life that reflected who I truly was, and the knowledge that their decision to exclude me had been their own undoing. Revenge, I learned, could be elegant. It could be patient. It could be the steady turning of small, true actions into a reality they could not rewrite. And when that reality finally met them, it wasn't noisy or vengeful. It was simply undeniable. The day of the wedding arrived like a storm you can see coming from miles away. Bright skies, soft music, laughter in every corner, but underneath it all, a tension you could almost taste. I hadn't planned to attend. I hadn't even thought about it, honestly. But fate, it seems, has its own way of scripting poetic moments. The week before the ceremony, the local paper had published a short feature about my community exhibition, the one I'd poured my heart into after everything fell apart. It wasn't some huge national headline, just a well-written human story about finding strength after rejection. The title? Turning Exclusion into Expression: How One Artist Built Her Own Family. The irony didn't hit me until the article went viral online, shared thousands of times for its raw honesty and emotional depth. People resonated with it, not because of revenge, but because it told the story of anyone who had ever felt unwanted and chose to rise anyway. And that's how, without meaning to, my quiet project found its way into the same social circles that were now buzzing about Emma's exclusive wedding. By the time the guests began arriving at the lush countryside venue, my name, the one they'd so carefully erased from the family narrative, was being whispered in the very halls they'd tried to keep me out of. I didn't go to the ceremony, but I did receive the photos, everyone smiling, pretending perfection. I saw my mother's forced grin, my cousin's champagne glasses raised high, the fake warmth of people who'd built a world without me. And yet, life has its way of balancing stories. Because while their ceremony was being live-streamed on social media, the comments section started filling up with people mentioning the article. Wait, isn't this the same family from that story? Imagine excluding someone like her from your wedding. Talk about poetic justice. No one had said anything cruel, just truth disguised as empathy. But truth travels fast, especially when wrapped in quiet irony. The comments weren't an attack, they were a mirror, and the family for the first time had to look at their reflection. Later that evening, as they moved from the ceremony to the reception, my phone buzzed nonstop. Screenshots, messages, even a call from Lily. "Everyone's talking about you," she whispered, her voice trembling between pride and disbelief. "They don't know what to say. Emma looks shaken." I didn't respond immediately. I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky, and let the irony sink in. The same people who had built walls to keep me invisible were now surrounded by whispers of my name. And not in anger, in admiration. That was the beauty of it. My revenge wasn't destruction. It was revelation. Hours later, when I finally checked my messages, there it was, a notification from Emma. I hesitated before opening it, part of me curious, part of me completely detached. The message was short. "I saw the article. Congratulations on everything you've done. You deserve it. I hope you're okay." For a moment, I almost smiled. It sounded like concern, but I could read the undertone: confusion, guilt, maybe even fear. She had expected me to fade quietly into bitterness. Instead, I had become everything she pretended to be: admired, respected, fulfilled. And she knew it. I didn't reply. Some silences are answers in themselves. But the moment they truly regretted everything came not from a headline or a post, but from something much simpler. A gesture that reached them where it hurt most. Their pride. The week after the wedding, I hosted a charity gala with the same community group that had supported my exhibition. It was an evening of music, stories, and art. No luxury, no pretense. Just authenticity. A local TV channel covered the event, calling it a night of real connection. Among the attendees was someone unexpected, Aunt Claire. She approached me quietly, no entourage, no pretense. She looked smaller somehow, humbled. "You did good, sweetheart," she said softly. "Really good. Everyone's been talking about how beautiful your work is. I didn't realize how wrong we'd been." I didn't need her apology, but hearing it was enough. Not because it fixed anything, but because it confirmed that the truth had finally found its way through the cracks. The rest of the family stayed silent, but I knew they saw it too. They saw the coverage, the pictures, the people gathered around something I had built on my own. And somewhere, deep down, I knew. The wedding they had worked so hard to perfect had already been overshadowed by something they couldn't control. The authenticity they had traded away for appearances. I didn't want them to suffer. I just wanted them to understand. To understand what it feels like to be excluded, not because you did something wrong, but because you didn't fit into someone else's version of perfect. And I think they did. Because slowly, one by one, the same relatives who had once turned away started reaching out, cautiously, tentatively, testing the waters of reconciliation. Some sent messages, some sent flowers, some said nothing at all but showed up quietly at my next exhibition. I didn't reject them. I welcomed them. Not for them, but for me. Because forgiveness, I realized, was the final stage of victory. Not the kind that absolves others, but the kind that frees you. Looking back, the day they regretted everything wasn't about the wedding. It wasn't about the gossip, the rumors, or the photos that circulated online. It was about the shift that happened in the aftermath, when the people who had tried to define me finally realized they never had the power to. My revenge had never been about humiliation. It was about restoration, about standing tall enough that they couldn't look at me without seeing the reflection of what they'd lost. Integrity, honesty, family. And that, I think, is the truest form of justice. When the ones who tried To break you have to watch you rebuild, stronger, brighter, and without their permission. As for Emma, she reached out again months later, this time with a longer message, an apology that felt real. She said she didn't know how much her decision had hurt me, that she had followed what others suggested, that she wanted to make things right. Maybe she meant it, maybe she didn't. I chose to forgive her anyway, not because she deserved it, but because I did. Because real revenge isn't about destroying someone's peace, it's about reclaiming your own. And mine, finally, was untouched. When the noise faded, when the posts stopped circulating and the messages slowed down, something unexpected settled in. Peace. Not the loud, triumphant kind that demands applause, but the quiet, steady peace that comes when you finally stop needing to prove anything to anyone. For months, I'd been driven by hurt, by the desire to reclaim what was taken from me, belonging, respect, dignity. But as time passed, I realized something profound. The family that had shut me out had also freed me. They didn't realize it then, but their rejection had been the start of my rebirth. For years, I'd been the kind of person who tried too hard, to please, to be accepted, to belong. I'd shrink myself to fit their version of perfect, laugh at jokes that hurt, stay silent when I should have spoken. I told myself that keeping peace was better than being honest. But peace built on silence isn't peace, it's surrender. Their betrayal tore that illusion apart. It forced me to see that belonging isn't about blood, it's about connection. It's about who claps for you when no one's watching, who listens when you speak, who stands beside you even when it's inconvenient. And when I stopped chasing validation, life started giving me something much better: alignment. The right people began showing up. The right opportunities found me. Even strangers, people who'd read my story, wrote to me saying, "Thank you." I felt the same once. And that made everything worth it. Forgiveness came slowly. Not as a single decision, but as a series of small choices. To stop replaying the moment I saw that wedding photo. To stop waiting for an apology that might never come. To stop wishing for a different past. Because forgiveness, I learned, isn't about saying, "It's okay." It's about saying, "It happened, but it doesn't own me anymore." So I forgave them, not to erase what they did, but to end their power over me. And once I did, I began to understand the real meaning of revenge. It's not the act of hurting someone back. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be, without losing your kindness along the way. My revenge was my growth, my peace, my happiness, and nothing, not even their silence, could take that away. Months later, when I visited my mother, the tension that once hung between us had softened. She hugged me longer than usual, her voice quiet when she said, "I'm proud of you." And for the first time in years, I believed her. Not because she said it, but because I no longer needed her to. Emma and I met again too, not as rivals, not as wounds pretending to heal, but as people trying to understand. She said, "I wish I had done things differently." And I said, "So do I, but maybe it had to happen this way." Because sometimes life separates you from people to show you who you are without them. Now, when I look at that old photo, the one of the golden wedding invitation that never came, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that pushed me to grow. Gratitude for the silence that taught me how to speak. Gratitude for the exclusion that led me home, to myself. If I've learned anything from all this, it's that betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise after it does. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply refusing to become like the people who hurt you. So here's what I'd tell anyone listening to my story. When life shuts a door in your face, don't waste your time knocking. Build another door. Build it out of strength, honesty, and self-respect. And when they finally notice what you've built, smile. Not out of pride, but peace. Because that's the day you'll know you've truly won.